Hello and welcome to my blog. Today, I would like to talk about how spirits communicate with us. On Monday, December 3rd, 1917 at 5:25 p.m. in England, the spirit Kathleen, speaking directly to the mind of a medium, said, "When we come to earth, friend, we say to one another by the way that we are going into the land of mist and twilight, that we may, in the interior world which we find there, shed abroad somewhat of our light and warmth. For, indeed, that these be much needed we are able to sense, even in those far spheres from which we come. You may wonder by what process of chemistry or dynamics this is made possible to us, and in detail. But we are able to give you a somewhat epitomized account of this affair, and so we will, if it would be of interest to you and those who shall come to read what we give you." Spirit Kathleen told this to the Reverend G. Val Owen in the book Life Beyond the Veil in the Ministry of Heaven section. Kathleen stated that the background to make communication possible is that we all live in the spirit universe. Our physical universe is a subset of the overall spirit domain. She tells us that we live in one ocean of spirit energy, and there are no sharp boundaries, only graduations of ratios of energy versus matter, light and darkness, and so on. It is if we all lived in the ocean, with certain species existing at great depths, with the entire weight of miles of water above them, and little or no light bleeding down, while others living further up, with less weight upon them and more light. Communication between disparate species would be difficult, but it would be possible. This is just one of the great revelations brought to us by Spiritism, that we don't live in an encapsulated bubble walled off from the afterlife. We live in the midst of spirit life. Hence, our transformation from physical to spirit life is not as traumatic as it would appear to us. It is the inadequacy of our senses which makes the transition seem so huge, so formidable. We are merely changing state, not being dissolved atom by atom. Our personality remains intact. Kathleen then goes on to detail 3 methods which are employed to handle communications between spirits and incarnates. Continuous posting. There is the method of continuous posting, wherein those workers nearest you hand on messages and reports to those in the sphere above, and they continue the operation until the message comes to its destination, where it is to be appropriately dealt with. This is done swiftly, and yet in the flight of any message through the spheres, it is sifted in each and that extracted which is proper to the workers of that particular sphere to undertake its answer. Also, messages from workers and prayers from the earth are filtered and made suitable for transmission into higher realms. Were this not done, their earth grossness would weigh them down so heavily that what was in them of sublimity would not be competent to rise and come to the sphere where it is appropriate it should find destination. Hence, prayers, pleas, and overtly spoken requests for divine intervention are indeed noticed, taken, and sent upwards to be analyzed and answered. Like the Wells Fargo team of horses that delivered mail from one outpost to another to eventually reach its destination, our appeals are loaded upon swift carriers to their journey's end. The New Testament tells us the power of prayer. In Mark chapter 11, verse 24, "Whatever you may ask for in prayer, believe you will receive it, and it will be granted to you." There's an explanation of this verse in Allan Kardec's The Gospel According to Spiritism. There are persons who contest the effectiveness of prayer, and they base their argument on the principle that if God knows our needs, it is superfluous to share them. They add further that, since everything in the universe is linked together by external laws, Our desires cannot change God's decrees. Without any doubt, there are natural and immutable laws which God cannot derogate according to one's caprice. There is a great distance, however, from believing this and believing that all life circumstances are subject to fatalism. If such were the case, humans would only be a passive instrument with no free will or initiative. Under such a hypothesis, there would be no other recourse than to bend one's head under the blow of every event without seeking to avoid it. No effort would be made to try to avert danger. Hence, we must use our free will to shape events in our favor while keeping in mind the divine laws, such as the Golden Rule. Staying within a harmony of love for all, we are free to fervently pray for assistance and a correct and good outcome to any situation. Now, the interesting part is that anything we ask for, we will receive it. One must look at this over the arc of an immortal life. One would not grant a 14-year-old boy his own car to drive. He would have to take classes and pass tests. His prayer would be granted, but not for years, which would seem to be an eternity for him. The same section also tells us, what God will grant them, if asked with trust, is courage, patience, and resignation. What God will also grant them are the means to extricate themselves from their difficulties with the aid of ideas suggested by good spirits at God's urging, thus leaving them the merit. God helps those who help themselves. Hence, the more we contribute to what we desire, if the goal is worthy, the more help that will be forthcoming. All of this is in harmony with God's laws, since using our free will to successfully complete a trial given to us, where we provide our sweat, our hard work, our dedication, our activity, intelligence, and prayer, all contributes to where the spirit realm will encourage our success to speed us on our way to ascend spiritually. After all, the goal of every soul is to one day become a pure spirit and to assist others along the way. Now, let's examine those prayers and pleas which are not aimed at growth or goodness. In the book Between Heaven and Earth by the Spirit André Louise and psychographed by Chico Xavier, there is a question about prayer. A student spirit asked the spirit Clarencio an interesting question. Could a person bent on committing a crime also be using a type of prayer? Clarencio answers, let us refrain from using the word prayer when dealing with imbalance. Let's use invocation instead. Whenever anyone nourishes the desire to commit a wrong, he or she is invoking powers of a low order and is mobilizing resources for which he or she will be held accountable. By means of the unfortunate impulses of our soul, we often lower ourselves to the frantic vibrations of anger or immortality, and in such a state it is easy to fall into the foul well of a crime, in whose den we are instantly connected to certain minds, stagnated in ignorance, which become instruments for our low idealizations, or for which we become deplorable playthings in the darkness. All of our aspirations set energies in motion for either good or evil, and for that very reason we are responsible for their direction. We must carefully analyze the choice we make in dealing with any problem or situation on the pathway set out before us, because our thought will sail before us to attract and shape our intended purpose. In every area of existence, life gives us what we really ask for, and we become debtors according to what we have received. A theme we always return to. We must learn to control our thoughts. Even trivial occurrences, such as when a person becomes an obstacle in our way, don't most of us immediately send out bad vibrations toward that person? I know I am guilty of that. There is little difference between that and actively wishing for a wrong to be committed. Clarencio warns us to be careful of what we want. because we may get it. He goes on to be more specific on the consequences. We can be certain, however, that evil is always a circle closed in on itself, temporarily holding those who have created it. It's like a cyst of short or long duration, which finally dissolves into the infinite good as minds in tune with it start reforming themselves. The Lord puts up with disharmony so that through it the moral readjustment of the spirits who sustain it may take place, since evil reacts on those who practice it, helping them to grasp the excellence and immortality of the good, which is the unshakable foundation of the law. We are all master of our own creation, but at the same time, their unfortunate slaves are happy wards. Let us ask and receive, but let us bear in mind that we must pay for everything we get. Responsibility is the divine principle that no one can escape. Evil reacts on those who practice it. How true! We have seen time and time again the plight of various acquaintances who attempt to get away with some deed only to end up once more on the short side of life. The rewards of wrongdoing are transitory. The rewards of goodness build upon the path to immortal contentment. Next, the Spirit Kathleen describes the direct method of communication. Direct method of communication. This method entails a high spirit talking directly to us. As an ambassador would speak for his country, a high spirit would be given the authority to perform whatever tasks are required to assist or hinder from a foolish act us in our physical life. Kathleen explains. There are those of you who have guides in the spheres for special work and guidance. Some of these guides are very high and bright angels, and their proper home is far above those spheres bordering on the earth. They may not ever be coming down to those of their charges, for, high as they be, they are not all powerful, and to descend to earth is very expensive of energy, by reason of the necessity of conditioning themselves to the spheres through which they pass, and in each sphere there is a new condition for them to achieve until they come to earth. This is done from time to time, and indeed not seldom, when such work is afoot as to warrant such undertaking. But we are ever careful of waste, who have so much to do for others' help, and do not spend lavishly even of that which is infinite in its supply. We can do our work better, as a rule, by the method of direct communication. One is never sure the number of humans on earth who are on vital missions. These could range from helping a small town grow through new businesses or finally obtain a clean government, building a religious or healing center, to leading a country. While all of us have a mission to improve, some are called for an elevated purpose. One example of a person where I am certain that a high spirit was assigned is Francisco Chico Xavier. In his case, we even know the name of the spirit mentor, Emmanuel. In fact, it is widely known in Brazil that when Chico died in 2002, Emmanuel, who had previously left Chico's side a few years earlier, was incarnating in Brazil, and Chico would be his guide in the 21st century. Hence, rotating responsibilities where one friend is on earth and the other in the spirit realm fully documents the closeness of how we are watched and guided by superior angels in heaven. Kathleen expounds upon the method. She tells us how such a direct link is created and maintained. In order to establish this, we devise a kind of telephone or telegraph, to use your own speech, a cord of vibrations and pulsations between us and you, and it is constructed of the blended vitality of the guide and the guided. I use here words I like not overmuch, but I cannot find other in your brain to use, so they must stand. I refer to such words as construct, vitality, and such as these. Sympathetic intercourse is by this means rendered continuous and sustained. It is like the system of nerves between the body and the brain. It is always potentially operative whenever need arises of help to be given. Whenever the charge turns to his faraway guide in thought or longing, that guide himself is at once aware and gives answer in the way he judges best. Kathleen uses the best words she could find in the mind of a non-scientific person in the 1910s. Imagine the spirit realm trying to deliver these advanced concepts to the tribes of Israel thousands of years before Christ. This is why we are told by Spiritism that books such as the Old and New Testament and other ancient religious writings were fashioned for the culture and technical level of the humans receiving it. If Kathleen were attempting to convey this notion today, she could speak plainer and in concepts a normal person could comprehend. She could tell us that the link between the spirit and the person is like having a cell phone that is always on and dialed into each other. Their respective geographical locations would never be an impediment to communication. One merely needs to touch to activate and either speak or text a query. The cloud. There is a third method, but more complicated than either of these I have summarized. It may perhaps be given such a name as universal, which is bad enough but must serve. In the first process, the stream of thought passing from Earth to spheres more or less remote is handled and modified in each sphere as it travels on its way, like a continuous post across continents, only there is no change of horses nor pause on the way. In the next, the line is ever open and ever charged, like a telephone with electricity, and is direct in line from the man on Earth to the guide in his own proper sphere. In the third, the process is distinct from either of these. It is that by which every thought and action of man is reported in the heavens, and may, by those competent to do so, be read from time to time. These records are real and permanent, but the aspect of them and their method of construction it is not possible for us to explain. Words have been very strained to serve in the first two descriptions. Here they fail in total. I will say but this, that every thought of every man has a universal application and effect. Call it ether, or what you will. The fluid which fills the spheres is of so sensitive and so compact and continuous a substance that if you touch it with a sigh at one end of the universe, the effect is registered at the other end. Here again, end is not a proper word to use, for in the sense you use it, there is no significance here, but that of which I now try so lamely to come at, so I may show somewhat of its wonder to you, is that which the Saviour Christ had in mind when, wiser than I, he did not name it with any name, but spoke of it only as it is found to be in operation thus: not a hair of your head is hurt, not a fledgling falls from its nest, but the Father of all is notified. Every thought and action of man is reported. This was written in 1917. Kathleen could not begin to describe how this process could work. But in 1955, 38 years later, more was revealed. In the realms of mediumship, psychographed by the Brazilian spiritist Chico Xavier, published in 1955, I notice an unusual introduction by the spirit Emmanuel, who usually writes moral exhortations. He began the introduction titled, Rays, Waves, Mediums, Minds, by surveying the history of science in what makes up our universe. He started with Leucippus, about 500 years before Christ, who theorized that everything was composed of atoms, surveying others, including the Curies, who discovered radium, finally mentioning Bohr, Planck, and Einstein, whereupon he writes, The vehicle of flesh, the human body, is now nothing more than an electric vortex governed by consciousness. Each tangible body is a bundle of concentrated energy. Matter is transformed into energy, and energy disappears to give way to matter. Raised to the status of investigators of the truth, chemists and physicists, geometricians and mathematicians have become today's priests of the spirit without desiring it. Due to their ongoing studies, materialism and atheism will be compelled to vanish for lack of matter, the base that had ensured their negativistic speculations. Laboratories are temples in which intelligence is driven to serve God, and even when intellectual activity is misguided, temporarily subordinated to the political hegemony that generates wars, the progress of science as a divine conquest continues to exalt the good and is bound for a glorious future. The future belongs to the Spirit. I believe he is telling us that no matter what a scientist believes as regards to a higher power, he or she is working toward the day when the existence of the spirit world can't be doubted, which even the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec tells us will occur one day. Now for the new information which supplies the missing link to the Spirit Kathleen's description, what she calls universal. Through the sentiments that characterize their inner life, all individuals emit specific rays and live within the spiritual wave with which they identify themselves. Such truths cannot remain semi-hidden in our sanctuaries of faith. They will radiate from the temples of science like mathematical equations. Hence, we all have a unique identification, the same as a RFID, radio frequency identification, chip, which is used to track packages and even help you check out goods from a store. It is a chip with a low-level energy transmitter that is attached to each individual good, so computer systems will instantly know the location, price, and description of the object. Another example is the flow of information from our cell phones or laptops on the Internet. Each packet of data has a unique identification in the header, so that nugget of data is tagged with who sent it, where it was sent from, the time it was sent, and the information contained in the message. Think of each and every one of us as a cell phone, which is always on, always broadcasting our vital signs and thoughts. Our signals don't have a limit measured in feet, as our cell phones do, but are unlimited as they fly all around us in all directions to be picked up and stored in the supreme library. Now turn your minds to the trillions, up to the power of infinity, packets of data that must emanate from every human or other creature from every planet in the universes, all captured and stored, all retrievable upon command, never wiped clean or forgotten, everything. When the NSA, National Security Administration, was first presented with the mandate to pick out possible terrorist activity, they realized they required data from a myriad amount of sources: cell phones, social networks, internet message boards, electronic invoices, ATM transactions, and other avenues. They knew they were trying to find a needle in a haystack, but their brilliant first step was to realize that to find a needle in a haystack, one first must create a haystack. Hence, they built server farms with immense storage capability and routed data from every application that we use in our daily life into one of the largest databases in the world. I surmise, but I have no direct knowledge of this. From this mountain of data, they could query and search the world for what they were tracking. Therefore, for the Supreme Intelligence, our life is an open book. Nothing is missing. Every thought and deed is recorded. One only needs to know our unique identifier, and all is revealed, all of it in the universal cloud, the database of all databases. From Jesus 2,000 years ago to 1917 during World War I to 1955 during the Cold War, we're being updated on what is actually happening in the spirit realm and how they track us. When one begins to read Spiritist literature, the parables that Jesus told us becomes clear. When he told us that the Father of all is notified of everything, this just wasn't a sentiment to make us think twice before we commit a wrong act, but a statement of fact. Only within the last 10 to 20 years could enough people visualize how this could occur. We are only told when we have the capacity to understand the concepts presented to us. This is why no literature presented to the human race should be regarded as the final and absolute word of God, since at each major stage of understanding we shall be given more information. Spiritism tells us that only the messages of love, fraternity, and charity are eternal, while all else is what was transmitted to people according to their level of sophistication at the time. Therefore, understand well, there is no such thing as privacy. Nothing we do, say, or think is ever hidden or unexposed. We all live in glass houses. On one hand, this is a frightening disclosure, but on the other, we all share the same circumstances. Spirits superior to us have journeyed through their time of undisciplined thoughts. They all understand what we are going through, and they all are sympathetic to our plight. Just as we watch our young children make mistake after mistake, but ever loving them and spurring on their growth, the spirit realm benevolently looks down upon us. One more hypothesis. Take all that you have read. We are connected to the universal cloud. We all live in the spirit ocean. We all send messages that can travel throughout the universe. We can communicate between different states of existences. What does this imply? As a thought experiment, think of your definition of distance. For us on Earth, it is the space, measured in miles or kilometers, between 2 points. Now think of a video game or a movie, where the characters travel throughout the universe they live in. There are distances in these man-made places. In the video game world, your avatar may have to travel from one land to another, a real distance to them, as they cross rivers, mountains, and oceans. On the screen, the scenes unfold, but all the images are in fact driven by software programmed by a team of analysts, coders, and managers. An actor in the game may take a plane from one city to another, but in reality, all within the confines of one studio. On screen, all appears immense. Expansive landscapes unfold, all created by teams of people who are in close association with each other. Commands are spoken and heard, while on the screen it may appear that different actors are continents apart. In the software domain, all the landscapes, characters, and dialogue are orchestrated by layers of systems, all in constant communication, whereupon a change of state in one aspect is immediately transmitted to all other sub-applications that need to know. A central database holds all static and dynamic data. Everything runs according to certain rules. For actors, there are limits to green screen interactions. Their voices and the ability of microphones to pick up sound is a constant. In the video world, the capability of the computer running the game, the screen resolution, and the memory size must all be respected. This is the true world we live in. God is the creator, the director of our universe. He lays down the rules that, try as we may to ignore, are impossible to isolate ourselves from for long. We are the actors and constructed characters in the world, a world real to us, for we are within it, but constructed as the Spirit Kathleen would say, as a vehicle for us to learn what we have been assigned. we wander from one movie set or software operating system platform to another, each with its own specifications, always, and this is important, taking with us our personality. This is the gift of God. We are given free will to roam, and as far as our capabilities will take us, in a land of many lands, in a mansion with many rooms. If you would like to learn more about the spirit universes, please read my book, Spirits and the Spirit Universe. It will go deeper into what I have just talked about. It will tell you what the spirit universe is, and what spirits are, and how we will all be part of that world. God bless.